Ladies and gentlemen, you tolerated more than you should have, because you believed in redemption. You saw potential where there was only manipulation. You confused chaos for depth. And that wasn't just a mistake, that was a reflection of your own misplaced loyalty, your own fear of being alone, and your refusal to admit that not everyone wants to be saved, and yet you stayed. You negotiated with tyranny. You tried to fix what was deliberately broken, but at some point, perhaps it was late at night, when the silence became unbearable, you understood something. You saw the pattern, the script, the repetition. You saw yourself disappearing, and so finally you left, not with fury, not with a scene. You left with the weight of every suppressed truth packed into your silence. And that silence, that was the loudest scream they'd ever hear. The absence of your presence. That's what shattered the illusion, not your words, not your arguments, not your sacrifices, but your absence. Because when the well runs dry, only then do the thirsty realize what they lost. But this is not about them. This is about you. It's about the person who chose truth over comfort, freedom over familiarity. It's about waking up from the delusion that your value must be proven through pain, that you must earn love by enduring suffering, that you must break yourself to keep the peace. No, you were never meant to be the sacrificial offering at the altar of someone else's ego. Now you build. You face the mirror. You pick up the responsibility you once gave away. You become dangerous, not in cruelty, but in competence, in clarity, in refusal to compromise your soul. That's the path of transformation. And you will be tempted, you know, tempted to explain yourself, tempted to look back, tempted to believe you were too harsh, but you weren't. You were just finally honest, and you must not apologize for reclaiming your life. This isn't bitterness, this is rebirth, and it requires courage. Be the person who walks away, not because they hate, but because they finally remembered who they are. Would you like this adapted for spoken delivery or turned into a video script? Leaving was an act of self-respect. Not revenge. Walking away wasn't about hurting the other person. It was about finally honoring your own worth and breaking the cycle of emotional manipulation. Absence is more powerful than confrontation. Your silence and departure spoke louder than any argument or plea ever could. The loss of your presence was the real turning point. You are not responsible for fixing broken people who refuse to change. Trying to save someone who thrives on chaos drains you and distracts you from your own growth. Freedom comes through facing uncomfortable truths, the courage to see things clearly, even when painful, is the first step toward reclaiming your identity and building a better life. True strength lies in clarity, not cruelty. You become powerful when you know your value, set boundaries, and no longer sacrifice your peace for someone else's dysfunction. Would you like a printable version or visual slide format of these keynotes? Leaving was an act of self-respect, not revenge, and that truth is hard to digest, especially in a world that romanticizes suffering for the sake of connection. When you're in a relationship with someone who distorts reality, manipulates your intentions, and feeds off your empathy, it becomes increasingly difficult to know where they end and where you begin. The confusion sets in. You're not sure if you're overreacting or being ungrateful. You're made to feel guilty for setting boundaries, selfish for needing space, and disloyal for speaking the truth. So you stay. You stay because you care. You stay because you're hoping that love, real, honest love, will somehow reach them. You try everything: patience, silence, confrontation, reason. You twist yourself into knots, overanalyze your tone, your timing, your emotions, just to avoid setting off another emotional landmine. And each time you think, maybe if I just explain it better, they'll understand. Maybe if I just hold on a little longer, they'll change, but they don't, because they don't want to. It's not that they can't see your efforts, it's that they don't value them. They treat your compassion like currency they're entitled to spend. And when you finally begin to notice the pattern, that your kindness is being used as a weapon against you, that's when the real internal war begins, because you've built your identity on being the one who stays, the one who fixes, the one who forgives. To walk away would be to admit that all the pain, all the sacrifice, all the compromise was not enough to make them love you in the way you deserved. But here's the hard truth. Self-respect doesn't flourish in fantasy. It thrives in clarity, and clarity, painful as it is, shows you what's actually happening, not what you wish were happening. It shows you that staying doesn't make you strong if staying means abandoning yourself. It shows you that you were confusing endurance with worthiness, that your love was real, but the situation wasn't. So when you left, you weren't trying to teach them a lesson. You weren't trying to make them suffer. You were trying to survive. You were choosing your sanity, your dignity, your life. And of course, they tried to make you feel guilty for that. Of course, they tried to spin it. Say you were cold or ungrateful or dramatic. But deep down you know you tried. You know you gave more chances than were deserved. You know you walked away only after realizing that staying any longer would mean losing yourself completely. Leaving was the moment you stopped negotiating with someone who was never willing to meet you halfway. It was the moment you chose silence over screaming, distance over dysfunction, peace over permission. And that moment wasn't easy, it was devastating. It meant grieving not just the person you hoped they were, but also the version of yourself that believed love had to be earned through pain. You didn't walk away with bitterness. You walked away with resolve. You stopped trying to justify your needs, stopped watering dead soil, stopped apologizing for expecting reciprocity, and in doing that, you reclaimed something sacred, your right to exist without being reduced, your right to be seen without having to shatter first, your right to love without being devoured. This wasn't vengeance, it was awakening, and in that awakening, you learned that self-respect isn't loud. It doesn't need to prove anything. It doesn't need to declare war. It just quietly exits the spaces where it's no longer welcome. It lets go of the hope that people who choose control will ever understand connection. It accepts that closure won't come from them. It comes from your decision to end the performance. You didn't leave to hurt them. You left because staying was hurting you, and that's not cruelty. That's clarity. That's the beginning of becoming someone who no longer compromises their soul for proximity. That's what choosing yourself really looks like. Absence is more powerful than confrontation, and that realization often doesn't arrive until long after the silence has settled. When you've spent weeks, months, even years, trying to communicate, trying to express your needs, trying to hold the mirror up to someone who refuses to look, you begin to realize that words lose their meaning in the presence of manipulation. You can scream into the void. You can craft the perfect sentence, rehearse the most rational explanation. But if the other person is committed to misunderstanding you, your effort becomes fuel for their distortion. They twist your clarity into conflict, your honesty into hostility, your pain into weakness. There's a moment when you see that every argument, every emotional breakdown, every attempt to explain yourself has become a performance, one where you're always cast as the problem, no matter how gently or reasonably you speak. That's when something inside you begins to shift. You stop trying to win the debate. You stop trying to prove the legitimacy of your experience to someone who is emotionally invested in denying it. You realize that it's not the volume of your voice that matters, it's the power of your absence. Because when you finally step back, when you finally go quiet, not in resentment but in finality, it forces a confrontation far more profound than any spoken one ever could. See, your presence was their anchor. Even if they devalued it, even if they took it for granted, they counted on your return, on your forgiveness, on your willingness to keep the cycle alive. Your presence was part of their ecosystem. It gave them someone to push against, someone to blame, someone to absorb the chaos they didn't want to face. But when that presence disappears, when there's no one left to argue with, no one left to fix it, no one left to tolerate it, reality starts to emerge. Not because they suddenly gain wisdom or empathy, but because the convenience is gone. The comfort of having someone carry the emotional weight is gone. The target of their projection is gone. And in that vacuum, they're left with themselves. And that's often the one person they've worked hardest to avoid. You stepping away creates a silence that speaks volumes. It says, I will no longer be your mirror, your cushion, your scapegoat. It says, I am done explaining my value to someone determined not to see it. It says, my peace is more important than your approval. And while they may interpret your silence as coldness or abandonment, it is in fact the most respectful thing you could have done for both of you. Because it stops the dance, it stops the dysfunction, it stops the illusion that anything healthy can grow in soil watered with denial. Confrontation can be necessary, yes, but there's a difference between confrontation for clarity and confrontation for survival. When you've reached the point where nothing changes, when every discussion turns into a game of deflection and blame, then silence becomes the only language left that cannot be twisted. It is not an act of war. It is a withdrawal of participation, a refusal to continue investing energy into a conversation that has only ever served to drain you. And here's the unexpected part. Your absence becomes their reality check. They may never admit it. They may never apologize. They may pretend not to notice. But the lack of your energy, your time, your emotional labor, it creates a shift, one they can't control, one they can't deny. And for someone used to manipulating others through emotional chaos, that shift is terrifying, because now the game has no players, the audience has left the theater, the performance is over, what remains is silence. And in that silence, your dignity echoes louder than any accusation ever could. It's not about making them miss you. It's about making space for you to remember who you are without the noise of their dysfunction. The absence becomes a declaration. I no longer need to fight to be seen. I no longer require acknowledgement from those committed to misunderstanding me. I am free, not because you let me go, but because I chose to walk. That choice, that absence, carries a power that cannot be taken back, diluted, or manipulated. It is final, it is clear, and it is yours. You are not responsible for fixing broken people who refuse to change. This is a fundamental truth that is difficult to accept, especially when you've spent so much of your time trying to heal someone else. There's something deeply ingrained in us, whether through family dynamics, societal expectations, or our own sense of compassion, that we are responsible for the well-being of others. We are taught that love means sacrificing ourselves, that patience means enduring pain, that healing means always giving. But these beliefs, as noble as they seem, are also the very things that hold us captive in unhealthy relationships, and they keep us tied to people who have no intention of changing. It's easy to fall into the trap of thinking that love can fix everything, that if you just love someone enough, they'll eventually see the error of their ways. But love is not a magic wand. It cannot change someone's fundamental nature, their values, or their deep-seated issues. The truth is, you cannot save someone who refuses to acknowledge that they need saving. You cannot fix someone who is invested in their own dysfunction. No matter how much you give, how much understanding you offer, how many second chances you extend, there comes a point when you have to accept that your effort is being wasted. The problem with this dynamic is that you begin to lose yourself in the process. You start to believe that your worth is tied to your ability to fix others. You convince yourself that if you just try harder, you can be the one to help them change. But what you're really doing is enabling them to stay the same, to never confront the truths they need to face, to never deal with the consequences of their actions. By trying to fix them, you end up complicit in their stagnation, feeding into their unwillingness to grow. This isn't to say that you should abandon people who are struggling. There's a significant difference between supporting someone in their journey to improve and sacrificing your own well-being for their sake. Support means encouraging them to take responsibility for their own actions, offering help when it's appropriate, but not carrying the entire burden. When you allow someone to continuously drain you, when you tolerate their refusal to change, you aren't helping them. You're just delaying the inevitable. You're enabling them to stay stuck in their patterns while you sink further into frustration, resentment, and exhaustion. At some point, you have to ask yourself, why am I sacrificing my own peace and happiness for someone who doesn't care enough to change? And the answer is never simple. It's often rooted in fear, guilt, or the desperate hope that love will eventually conquer all. But you must realize that it's not your responsibility to fix another person's brokenness. That's not the role you were meant to play. You are not the healer of others' wounds unless they are willing to do the work themselves. And that's a crucial distinction to make. Healing takes two people, one who is willing to confront their issues and another who is willing to support that process. If only one person is doing the work, it becomes a one-sided endeavor that leads to burnout. It's also essential to understand that change only happens when the person who needs it is ready to make the change. You cannot push, drag, or force someone into a transformation they don't want. People only change when they're ready, when they have done the hard internal work of confronting their flaws, their behaviors, and their shortcomings. You cannot carry the weight of their transformation on your shoulders. It's not yours to bear, and it will break you if you try, and yet, so many of us continue to try. We cling to the illusion that if we just push hard enough, they'll see the light and everything will be okay. But that's not how it works. The reality is much harsher. People who don't want to change won't, and that is a bitter pill to swallow. It's not that they're bad people, it's that they are stuck in their own narrative, unwilling or unable to break free from the patterns that define them. And you cannot change their mind. When you finally realize this, it feels like a weight lifts off your shoulders. You no longer have to exhaust yourself trying to save someone who doesn't want saving. You can stop feeling guilty for not doing enough, for not being enough. You are enough. You are worthy of love, respect, and peace, and you don't have to earn that by constantly giving to someone who refuses to give back. You deserve to have your own needs met, your own boundaries respected, and your own life valued, not as a fixer or a savior, but as a person who has every right to live fully, freely, and without guilt. It's not your job to fix anyone. It's your job to fix yourself, to reclaim your energy, to take back your peace, and to remember that your worth is not tied to your ability to save others. When you can let go of that responsibility, you free yourself to create a life that is focused on your own growth, your own well-being, and your own happiness. The truth is that healing only comes when both parties are willing to put in the effort. And if they're not willing, it's not your responsibility to carry the load. Freedom comes through facing uncomfortable truths. This isn't a cliché or motivational fluff, it's a reality that too many of us avoid because we are afraid of what the truth will reveal about ourselves, about others, and about the world around us. We convince ourselves that by staying in the comfort of our illusions, we can avoid the discomfort of confronting what's really happening in our lives. We'd rather continue living in denial than face the truth, because the truth demands change. It demands action. It requires us to grow, to shed our old ways of thinking, and to embrace a new, often more difficult path forward. The truth doesn't care about our comfort zones. It doesn't wait until we're ready. It doesn't care how much we've invested in the stories we've told ourselves about how things are. It simply is, and the longer we run from it, the more it will chase us. The more we ignore it, the louder it gets. The more we suppress it, the more damaging it becomes. Avoiding the truth is not a way to protect ourselves. It is a way to stay trapped. It keeps us locked in patterns that don't serve us, in relationships that drain us, and in habits that prevent us from being who we are capable of becoming. But facing the truth, no matter how painful or uncomfortable, is the only way to reclaim our power, and that's where freedom begins. It starts with the courage to face what we've been avoiding. It starts with the willingness to acknowledge the ways we've been deceiving ourselves, the ways we've allowed others to treat us, and the ways we've compromised our own values for the sake of comfort or security. The truth is hard, especially when it reveals that we've been complicit in our own suffering. Maybe we've allowed toxic people into our lives because we didn't believe we were worthy of better. Maybe we've let ourselves be mistreated, thinking that we needed to earn love through sacrifice or pain. Maybe we've ignored the signs that a relationship was unhealthy, telling ourselves that things would get better if we just tried harder. These are difficult truths to face because they force us to take responsibility for the choices we've made and to acknowledge the ways we've neglected ourselves in the process. But when we face these truths head on, we begin to understand that we have the power to change. We are not victims of circumstances. We are the creators of our own lives. Once we accept the truth, we can take control of our narrative. We no longer have to stay stuck in toxic patterns. We can choose to set boundaries, to walk away from situations and people that no longer serve us, and to start living in alignment with our own values. This is the freedom that comes from truth. It is not the freedom to avoid pain or discomfort, but the freedom to live authentically. It is the freedom to stand in our own power, to honor our own needs, and to stop making excuses for the way we've been treated or the way we've allowed ourselves to be treated. It's the freedom to stop pretending that things are fine when they're not, and to stop pretending that we are okay when we're not. When you face the truth, you stop living in a world of illusions. You stop making excuses for people who hurt you, for situations that drain you, and for behaviors that are not aligned with who you want to be. You stop telling yourself that you should be grateful for what you have, even when it's costing you your peace. You stop hiding behind the mask of everything's fine, and start showing up as your real, raw, authentic self. And that is terrifying, because it means confronting all the ways you've been avoiding your own power. It means letting go of the false narratives that have kept you small and safe in the past, but it also means stepping into your true potential. It means embracing the discomfort that comes with growth. It means understanding that you are capable of more than you ever thought possible, but only if you're willing to face the hard truths and take responsibility for your own life. It means releasing the fear of being judged, rejected, or misunderstood, and trusting that your truth is enough. Freedom is not about running away from pain. It's about facing it, learning from it, and moving forward with the knowledge that you no longer have to live in denial. When you face the truth, you take control of your destiny. You stop giving away your power to circumstances or to other people's opinions. You stop relying on external validation to feel worthy. You stop being a passenger in your own life and become the driver. And that's where real transformation begins. The freedom to choose your own path, the courage to walk away from the things that no longer serve you, and the strength to embrace the discomfort that comes with change are the building blocks of a life that is authentically yours. This is the freedom that comes from facing uncomfortable truths, the freedom to become who you were always meant to be. It's not easy, it's not comfortable, but it's the only way to truly live a life of purpose, integrity, and authenticity. And that is the kind of freedom that is worth fighting for. True strength lies in clarity, not cruelty. This is an essential principle that many overlook, often confusing the two as if the ability to be harsh or assertive is what defines strength. People often think that being strong means being unyielding, controlling, or even aggressive in the face of adversity. We've been conditioned to equate power with force, with the ability to dominate or overpower those who challenge us. But real strength, lasting, sustainable, transformative strength, is found in clarity of purpose, clarity of boundaries, and clarity of self-respect. Strength is not about being loud or tough. It's about knowing who you are, what you stand for, and what you are willing to tolerate without the need to belittle, demean, or manipulate others. Clarity means being able to see the situation as it truly is, without the distortion of emotion or ego. When you are clear, you are able to assess people, relationships, and situations from a place of objectivity and self-awareness. You don't need to prove anything to anyone because your understanding of your own worth is firm. When you know who you are, what you want, and what you deserve, you no longer feel the need to demand validation from others or engage in power struggles that drain your energy. You simply act with integrity, and your presence becomes a quiet force that commands respect, not through intimidation, but through the consistency of your actions and the strength of your boundaries. Strength is not about being heartless or rigid. It's about having the ability to choose where you invest your emotional and mental energy. When you are clear, you understand that there are people who will try to manipulate, control, or take advantage of your kindness, and you no longer allow that behavior to define your interactions. You don't engage in petty fights or battles for power. You simply step back, recognizing that not every conflict is yours to resolve. Your peace is more valuable than the drama or toxicity that others try to pull you into. Cruelty, on the other hand, is a response born from insecurity and confusion. It is a defense mechanism that comes from feeling threatened, disrespected, or fearful of being vulnerable. When people act out of cruelty, it's often because they don't have clarity about their own worth or boundaries. They lash out to protect themselves or to get the upper hand, believing that dominating others will somehow give them the validation or power they seek. But cruelty is rooted in weakness. It comes from a place of fear, not strength. It is a knee-jerk reaction to vulnerability, and it only serves to perpetuate a cycle of hurt, mistrust, and disconnection. In contrast, when you act from a place of clarity, you understand that true power does not come from imposing your will on others, but from respecting your own needs and honoring the needs of others as well. Clarity allows you to navigate relationships and situations with discernment, knowing when to speak up, when to let go, and when to walk away. It gives you the wisdom to pick your battles carefully, knowing that not everything requires a confrontation. Some situations require patience, others require action, but always, clarity guides your decisions. Furthermore, when you act with clarity, you recognize that your words and actions have power, not to dominate or control, but to create. They have the power to influence others positively, to inspire, to teach, and to lead by example. The most impactful leaders throughout history were those who acted from a place of clarity, not cruelty. They understood their purpose, and they communicated it with integrity and compassion. They didn't need to crush their opponents or belittle those who disagreed with them. They knew that their strength lay not in overpowering others, but in standing firm in their beliefs and acting with wisdom, empathy, and respect. One of the greatest misconceptions about strength is that it's about being untouchable, invincible, and above reproach. But true strength is about being grounded in your values, acknowledging your vulnerabilities, and standing by what you believe, even when it's difficult. It's about being willing to admit when you're wrong, to apologize when necessary, and to correct your course without ego. Strength is not about being perfect. It's about being honest, authentic, and unwavering in your commitment to yourself and your integrity. The strength to be kind, the strength to walk away when necessary, the strength to say no to things that drain you, and the strength to protect your peace. These are the marks of true power. Cruelty, on the other hand, is the illusion of strength. It's loud, it's aggressive, and it demands attention, but it is ultimately hollow. It lacks the depth, the quiet confidence, and the resilience that true strength is built on. Cruelty comes from a place of scarcity, while clarity comes from a place of abundance. When you are clear, you don't need to take from others to feel whole. You are already whole. True strength is rooted in understanding. Understanding that your peace is your responsibility, that your worth is not negotiable, and that your actions should reflect your value. When you act from clarity, you are not swayed by external pressures or the need to prove yourself. You stand firm in your truth, and that is a force far greater than any display of aggression or cruelty. In the end, it's not about the battles you fought or the people you tried to change. It's about the peace you've cultivated within yourself. True strength doesn't come from proving your power to others. It comes from knowing who you are and standing unwavering in that truth. It comes from having the courage to walk away when needed, the clarity to set boundaries that honor your worth, and the wisdom to recognize when to stay silent, when to speak up, and when to let go. When you stop investing in toxic dynamics and start investing in your own growth, you reclaim your peace and, in turn, your power. The moment you realize that your worth is not determined by the approval of others, you unlock a freedom that transcends the need for validation. The moment you understand that your energy is sacred, you stop giving it to people or situations that deplete you. And the moment you accept that you cannot change anyone who is unwilling to change themselves, you free yourself from the cycle of frustration and emotional exhaustion. This journey is not easy, and it's certainly not quick, but it's the only path that leads to true emotional liberation. You don't need anyone else's permission to be whole. You don't need to prove your worth to anyone. The only person who needs to understand your value is you. And when you finally realize that, you become unshakable. You become the architect of your own peace and the master of your own life. So, embrace the silence, honor your absence, and trust that letting go is the most powerful thing you can do for yourself. You are worthy of a life filled with respect, authenticity, and joy. It's time to step into that truth and never look back.